Good afternoon and welcome to another enlightening edition of ENG4E. That is Grade 12 Workplace Preparation English, brought to you by WASA Distance Education Center. I am your instructor for this course, Mike Laverty, and today's date is Tuesday, April the 11th, 2023. And today's date marks class number 32 of our 34 classes together. So we've got 3 more, including today's class. And the focus on this week will be to prepare you for the final exam. So just I was trying to, since we had covered all of the course material and we had 3 days remaining, I was just trying to find ways to prepare students for the final exam, get you in the proper state of mind to write the final exam. So today we're going to practice some reading skills, some strategies for when you're presented with a text, because that's I can guarantee you that's what's going to happen on the final exam is you'll be given a text to read, and then you will of course read it and then have to respond to it. You'll have to answer some questions about it. Looking at some stuff that's right in the text, and then also reading between the lines and bringing some information to the text, so that kind of thing. Right, so that'll be the focus of our time today. Please note some important dates. So this is week 9 of term 2A, so we have 9 weeks of classes in term 2A, and this is the only term where there's no admin week in between the 2 terms, so we're just jumping right into term 2B this coming Monday. So with that being said, April 11th is the deadline for applying for term 2B. So if you want to apply to take a course in term 2B, today is the deadline for doing that. Today's the deadline for applying for that term. And that ties in with the next important date to keep in mind is June 15th is the graduation day. So that date is, we're about 2 months away from graduation day. So all of the coursework you've been submitting all along, all of the hard work you've been putting in, it all leads up to you getting credits, right? And you can't graduate until you have enough credits. But you have to be realistic with your time and just be aware of how much time you can really commit to this course and any other courses you may be taking right now. So if you haven't started yet, if you haven't started your coursework for ENG4E, then you're getting really down to the wire here. So this is like you only have one more term to do a course, right? So that's it's very hard to get an entire course done in that amount of time. So if you've already gotten started, then that's fine, but just know that it might be better. It might be better for some students to maybe think about next school year and give themselves all the time they need to complete a course, because all the stuff you hand in this school year, it can't be just carried over till next school year. It doesn't work that way, unfortunately, so you have to finish the course before June 15th. You have to write your final exam, right? So that's a lot of things to write and study for from now until June 15th. Which brings us to our course schedule. So in my previous classes in ENG4E, we covered units 1, 2, 3, and 4. Last week we did a novel study where we took a closer look at 4 chapters in our book on this course has an assigned novel, Where the Rivers Meet. So we had a look at 4 of those chapters and really kind of dove into that book and tried to get a deeper understanding of it. I know I did by teaching that to you. And then, of course, this week, the final week, will be your final exam preparation. And that final exam is 20% of your final 20% of your final grade. Yeah, so 20% of your final grade in ENG4E will be determined by this final exam. So we need to spend some time reviewing some key concepts. So thanks for our listeners out there listening to us on 91.9 FM or perhaps on Bell ExpressVu channel 972. Please note that you can phone in our studio at 1-800-465-7144. Again, our toll-free studio number is 1-800-465-7144. And our local number is 1-807-737-4017. So you can phone in. We are live every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And of course, we only have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday this week, but we'll be live today, tomorrow, and Thursday from 2 to 2:50 p.m. Central Standard Time. And you can also listen to us live by using the Zoom application. So on a browser, that's zoom.us, or just download the Zoom app on your phone or mobile device or whatever device you have. Click the Join Now, and 417-669-9799 is the Zoom meeting link. And if you can't catch us live, then you can search for my channel at youtube.com. So just type in Laverty Wassa, go to those playlists, and you will find all of my ENG4E playlists. Please contact me directly through email. That's mlaverty, MLAVERTY, at nnecschools.org. Find me on Facebook Messenger. My professional Facebook account is Laverty Wassa, LAVERTY at Wassa. Sorry, LAVERTY space Wassa. And if you search Wassa on Facebook, you'll find all kinds of Wassa educators and teachers and administrators and things like that. And you can add them as a friend on Facebook, and you can send them messages directly. You can phone the Wassa building here in Sulakota at 1-807-737-1488. I'm at extension 2211, and toll free at 1-800-667-3703. That's toll free to phone Wassa, 1-800-667-3703. And just a gentle reminder, if after you've been taking this course for 8 weeks, so assuming that you tuned in from day 1 and you put the 8 weeks in, you should have read the study guide, units 1 through 4. You should have read the novel, Where the Rivers Meet. You should have completed all the assignments in units 1, 2, and 3, and you should be working right now on wrapping up your assignments in unit 4. So here's today's plan. Here's our plan for today. We will do an article of the day. So I think, and I might change my gears after seeing how this goes, but what I'd like to do is I'd like to start off with an article. So I'm going to throw a brand new text at you, hopefully one you've never seen before, and then we'll sort of get some experience, and we'll get some training done on that experience of getting a new text thrown at you, and then finding the tools to talk about it, how to analyze it, how to break down, how it's written, why it was written, look at some interesting uses of language, right? So we'll be talking about, how something is formatted, how it's organized, the content of it. We'll be talking about the purpose of the article. And then we could also talk about some of the elements of narrative, right? The elements of storytelling. So after we do that, we'll prepare, and then we're also preparing for the final exam or the course culminating activity. So the final exam is a 2-hour test. That's a 2-hour timed test. And then the course culminating activity is a longer assignment. And then you complete. You would complete that at home and send back. So option number 1 is you writing the course culminating activity. Sorry, option number 1 is you writing a final exam. And in order to do so, we have to have someone, excuse me, we have to have someone in the room with you to verify that you were in a certain spot at a certain time writing a test and you didn't bring in any notes or any ways that would sort of give you like an unfair advantage in the test. And it's not about you personally. It's just about making sure that everybody has the same chance to get the grade that they deserve, right? So that's why we do that. It's everybody has to adhere to the same guidelines and the same rules, right? And if we can't find someone to be in the room with you, if you can't find what we call a proctor or an invigilator, then we will have to do the course culminating activity. Learning goals for today are to take notes as we take a close look at an article. So we're looking at like the format, the purpose, the content. And then you're going to watch a live demonstration of myself, your teacher, taking a previous Ontario Secondary School literacy test. So the literacy test is, if you're attending a high school, then you take this test as part of one of your graduation requirements. And then the alternative to taking the test is to take the literacy course, which is offered at WASA, and I will in fact be teaching that course next term. And so I like to show students this literacy test because I feel that it's a great opportunity to practice your reading and writing skills. So we'll be doing a live demonstration by going to that website, ontarioliteracy.ca. And then hopefully picking up some strategies for writing the final exam. So hopefully all this is leading up to you as a student creating your own strategy in anticipation of taking the final exam. So some strategies you might want to have put in place is simply studying beforehand, right? So and you can do that by watching my courses, by just reviewing all of the assignments you've been given, and maybe that's something we could actually go through too as a class. We could just simply scroll through all of the units and just have a look at the types of questions you've been asked to do, and just to sort of look at some patterns, right? Look at some of the types of questions that you've been asked in the past, because those are the kind of questions you're going to be asked on the final exam. So you're looking at studying beforehand, reviewing your notes, practicing your skills. That's what we're doing today. We're going to practice our skills, and staying focused and calm during the test. And that's a good strategy to have, right? Is to practice breathing techniques. That's what I would use. 3 deep breaths in. 3 seconds. Breathe deep in. You could try it right now. Just breathe in. Hold it for about 1, 2, 3. So, and then as you exhale, count a little bit longer, say 4 or 5 seconds. So, I would encourage you do that in kind of any stressful situation, and maybe even more importantly, it's good to recognize situations in life that are gonna stress you out, and try to do as much stuff as you can beforehand to sort of like keep your mind at ease and keep yourself focused, right? So as soon as that exam is put down in front of you, I would, take a deep breath, have a look at it, get your mind focused, kind of get in the game. It's, I use a lot of sports metaphors, but get yourself in the game and get yourself prepared to write that test and to do well on it. All right, so with that in mind, I am just going to pull up my chosen article of the day. Oh, whoops. Just got to make an adjustment here on my Zoom. Okay, give me one moment, please. Okay, here we go. So, as I've done many times in the past, I have chosen an article that was published in the Globe and Mail. This one was just published yesterday, so it's about it's a very recent story. It's one that's ongoing, and hopefully is being resolved right now. So you've got a lot of people living in Quebec, and they've had this power outage based off these terrible ice storms, and then people are still waiting for their power to come back on. Even so. So the title of the article is "Frustration Mounts for Quebecers Still Without Power 5 Days After Ice Storm." So that is, of course, our title. We've got a byline that is, who wrote it and where it was published. So this one just says Montreal, the Canadian Press, and the date it was published, April 10th, 2023. And then, of course, if we scroll down, we've got, it looks to be like a hydro worker. That is, of course, the story's photo. Sometimes they come with a caption that tells us more information about the not the photographer, but the person in the photograph. All right, so I'm going to read the article out loud, and then we'll take it from there. Then we'll do a discussion of the text after I read the whole thing. Frustration was mounting on Monday for Quebecers still without power 5 days after a major ice storm, as the province's hydro utility worked to reconnect the remaining homes and businesses cut off from the grid. Erin Robert, a resident of Gatineau, Quebec, near Ottawa, said her home was part of a, quote, small pocket of hydro customers in the area without power. Robert said it was, quote, unacceptable that residents still had no electricity and no word about when it might return. She continued to say, there are small children here. There are families here. There are elderly people living around us, she said. No one's checked in. No one's given us an idea. We're so very disappointed. Hydro-Quebec said it hoped to restore power on Monday to nearly all the tens of thousands of customers still without electricity since Wednesday's storm. Slightly more than 24,000 homes and businesses remained cut off across Quebec as of 4:30 p.m., down from 40,000 Monday morning. Most were in the Montreal, Outaouais, not trying to pronounce that one, Montérégie, and Laval regions. The utility said electricity had been restored to over 95% of the more than 1.1 million customers who were affected after the weight of the freezing rain split tree trunks and sent branches crashing over power lines. It said the, quote, quasi-totality of customers should get power back by the end of the day. But it warned there could be a few more complex cases that could take longer. So that's quasi means almost, right? So they're getting power back to almost everybody. The message didn't appear to satisfy some residents who turned to social media to speak of disrupted Easter plans, spoiled food, and absent hydro crews. Some said the power had come back only partially, or that it had gone back out after being restored. Robert said that she and her husband had to send her 2 daycare-aged children to stay with relatives because her home was too cold. She said her basement relies on a sump pump to keep water out, meaning that she and her husband had to take days off work to ensure their generator kept running to power it. Between the time off work, gasoline for the generator, and spoiled food, she said the outage had become costly and frustrating. She said all she could do was wait, adding that she felt, quote, trapped. I don't find it acceptable, she said. I think their best efforts have come up short, and I think it's nuts that it's still out at this point. Officials also warned people not to use fuel-burning appliances inside after a number of reports of carbon monoxide poisoning. Montreal Public Health said Sunday that 180 cases of carbon monoxide poisoning had been reported at emergency rooms in the city since the storm, including more than 50 reported since Saturday. On Monday morning, a spokesperson for the ambulance services Urgency Santé said a total of 129 people from Montreal and its northern suburb Laval had to be transported to hospital for monoxide poisoning symptoms since the ice storm, but none in the past 12 to 16 hours. All right, so really, I want to just briefly talk about some strategies we can use to talk about a text, right? So that's, we just have to be reminded of the tools we have at our disposal, right? So, when you answer questions about the text, whatever those questions may be, you do have some sort of universal groundwork to work on. So, you can discuss the content of the article, right? So, and the content is, and that is, you citing specific words and sentences, this is the plot, right? To use an element of narrative, it's what happened. What and this is what happened. This is the 5 W's and the 1 H, right? So the who, what, where, when, why, and the how, right? You can talk about the the format. How the information is organized. So there's the content, there's the format, and you could talk about the purpose. In this case, it is to inform. Other options would include to persuade, like an opinion piece, or to entertain. So I would really encourage students to think about those 3 aspects. So the content of the text, so just focusing on what's actually written on the page. And when you answer questions about a text, it's really important that you do cite specific words and sentences from the text, right? So it's important that you grab words and underline, specific words and sentences and then talk about them, right? and then you could even cite them directly. You could quote them directly in your answers. So you know, and that's simply talking about a summary, right? And if we look at how this article is, the content of it and how it's formatted, it's written like most news reports are, where the most important information comes at the start. And so the most important information is just simply letting readers know about the storm and then going into the details. But if we look at how this article is formatted, this woman, Erin Roberts, she's quoted throughout the article. A lot of her quotes are about, her reaction to the article, right? So that's something that we can, that you can talk about, right? Again, and that's the element of the, remember when we talked about stories, and the plot is just simply what happened. It's just this happened, then this happened, right? It's just a bunch of information. But the theme of the article or the theme of the story is like the deeper meaning and like so you could ask yourself like, what's the main idea? And that's really that's very important to have figured out, right? So if you're being asked to provide a summary of a text, to summarize it in your own words, you should express what you think is the main idea. And I think the main idea of this article is to I don't know, to highlight the frustrations of these hydro customers in Quebec. Without power in Quebec. And that's really important, right? And that changes how the story is told. It changes the format of the story. It changes the content of the story. This isn't a story that's just telling us about the storm and how bad the storm was and efforts to get the power back on. It's about that, but more importantly, the main idea is to highlight the frustrations of hydro customers without power in Quebec. That's the main. You know, you could say to highlight. You could also say to inform. To inform readers about, right? You could also say it that way. To inform readers about, you know, so you could either to highlight or to inform readers about the frustrations of the hydro customers without power in Quebec, right? So that's the main idea of the article. That's why it was written. And so that's sort of like the overall context for the text that you've been given, the text that you've been assigned, right? So you can ask yourself, who wrote it, how did they write it, where did they publish it, why did they publish it? So those are all the context questions, right? Trying to put the work into some kind of a context. Just ask some very meaningful questions, and then you can go in and just sort of see how it was written, and you could pull out some keywords here. So, but that's what I would like you to focus on is the content, the format, the purpose of the article, why it was written, how it's written, what's in it, and any other information that you can you can get from the article, right? So it's really like it's a two-part process, right? So you're not just simply looking for information, you're paying attention to how the information is delivered, the order in which the information is delivered, how the article is broken up into paragraphs. In your response, you can actually count the paragraphs, and that's a strategy that I would maybe suggest you do. Like if that's paragraph 1, then this is paragraph 2, this is paragraph 3, and you can say, a question you might get would be, how does the author make the reader care about the frustrations, or how do we learn about the frustrations of these hydro customers? And you can say, well, in paragraph 2, a hydro customer by the name of Aaron Robert is quoted as saying, and then just quote directly from the article, right? So, be specific. Always be specific. Highlight things from the article. Refer back to the article as much as you can, as much as possible. Talk about its format, talk about its content, and talk about its purpose, why it was written. And if you can do all those things, then you will give yourself material to talk about, right? I think that's part of it too. You need a framework to sort of base your discussion off. So hopefully that is helpful, and that sort of gets you going on the right path. The second thing I want to do today was have a look at the Ontario literacy.ca website. And so if you open up a browser, like Chrome or Firefox or whatever you want to use, and if you go to ontarioliteracy.ca and you click on OSSLT practice tests up here at the top of the screen, you'll be given a whole bunch of practice tests that you can take. Now, what I would like to do is this website, you do have to set up an account to get the full functioning version of the website. So what I would suggest to you, if you feel that this is something that you could use, and you think that it could help you, and I wouldn't share it with you if I didn't think it would, but if you want to go ahead and use this website, then you can just take the tests on your own. Or if you want, you could even send your responses to me, and I could have a look at it and just let you know if you're on the right track or not. Yes, that is something that I would suggest that you do. All right, so I'm on the website, and then what I'm gonna do is I was gonna select one of these tests to undertake with us right now as a class to do this together. And so up at the top, I've clicked on the OSSLT practice test, and I've gone to the 2015-2016 test. And if you go to the booklet, you click on that booklet, it brings up an actual test that students were writing in the year 2016. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a reading assignment together here. So I'm just going to read the assignment out on. So we have an article called "The Lighthouse Builder." And one strategy I would do, see, you may not see multiple choice questions, but you will see questions about your text. So I would suggest to you to read those questions before you start reading the test, or even if you just skim or scan them, it's nice to just know what you're getting into before you start reading and answering the questions. So question 1 says, which factor contributed the most difficulty to building the open sea lighthouse? So we got to think about that. So what made it hard about building this lighthouse? Which phrase shows why Winstanley was so committed to building the lighthouse in 1698? So we got this man named Winstanley. Why was he so committed to building the lighthouse? In 1698, why was the project considered a success? Right. So when they finally built this thing, why was it considered to be a success? Question 4, which word is closest in meaning to depict? So we got to think about that word depict. Some of these questions are referencing specific paragraphs, so you may want to just go back to those ones after. Which of the following best demonstrates Winstanley's overconfidence? So why was this guy overconfident? What does paragraph 7 contribute to the passage? So let's go back to that one. Question 7 asks about what is emphasized by the repetition of no in paragraph 8. What is the most likely reason why efforts to build a lighthouse in such a difficult location persisted? So why were people so determined to build a lighthouse in this location? And overall, how was the selection organized? So chronologically, order of importance, comparison and contrast. Is it providing an opinion and then giving us supporting details to back up that opinion? Let's find out. The Lighthouse Builder. Engineers need to have faith in their designs, but overconfidence can be disastrous. Such was the case with Henry Winstanley, who designed and constructed the world's first open-sea lighthouse on a treacherous group of rocks in the English Channel. He was so certain of his craft that he claimed he would be willing to weather the strongest storm within the confines of the structure. No one knows how many ships were destroyed at Eddystone Reef, but by the end of the 17th century, the sailors and ship owners of Plymouth petitioned for the building of a lighthouse, even though there was general agreement that the task was impossible. Winstanley, furious because of the loss of 2 of his own 5 ships on the reef, submitted plans and won the contract to build one, despite a complete lack of qualifications. It was a forbidding challenge. No lighthouse had ever been built out at sea on an isolated rock. It took 8 hours of solid rowing to reach the site. Work could only be done at low tide, which was interrupted 4 times daily by an incoming rush of rising water, and the weather could be terrible. Progress was slow on the 20-meter-high wooden structure, but on November 14, 1698, Winstanley climbed its steps and lit 50 candles in the lantern, for the first time marking the location of the Eddystone. With the bright beacon guiding ships away from the reef, the project was considered successful. At least it was until storm waves damaged the building's sides and reached its top, causing Winstanley to set about repairing it, or more accurately, rebuilding it from scratch. The quote, new improved lighthouse added 12 meters to the original height and was far stronger, 12-sided and braced by steel and stone. Modern drawings depict it as a fancy and colorful site, topped by a large weather vane and appointed with a spacious stateroom for guests. With the upgrades completed in the spring of 1699, Winstanley was satisfied. Ships approaching Plymouth were safe at last. But skeptics doubted the long-term success of the project. When they claimed it was impossible that the lighthouse should continue to stand in severe weather, Winstanley, filled with pride, boasted that he wished to be in the lighthouse during the greatest storm that ever was. His wish was too soon granted. On November 25, 1703, despite a severe windstorm warning, Winstanley insisted on journeying to the lighthouse with 5 men to make necessary repairs. On the 26th, England was hit by the worst tempest ever recorded there. Hurricane winds toppled 2,000 chimney stacks in London alone. Roofs had their tiles ripped off. Windmills were blown around at such speeds that the friction set them on fire. Shipwrecks blocked London Bridge, causing the waters to rise, and the storm had an earthquake-like effect on the masonry and architecture on the island. When the storm subsided and ships were able to safely sail, those passing by the Eddystone found themselves once again in danger. The reef held no crew, no Winstanley, and no lighthouse. Only a few twisted pieces of metal showed that anything had ever been there. Winstanley's wish to test the lighthouse had come true, and the building had failed. Nonetheless, Winstanley had proven it possible to save ships approaching Plymouth. The economical benefits of the beacon were so clear that a new lighthouse was completed in 1709. Others followed, including the most recent, a 51-meter-high tower whose light can be seen for nearly 39 kilometers. But of Winstanley's masterpiece there remains not a sign. All right, so if we keep that in mind, and we go back to the questions that have been asked of us. And so we could also ask ourselves some of the previous questions that had come up, right? So, we could ask ourselves, what's the format of this article? This is a nonfiction article. It's history. It uses, storytelling techniques. So that's our format. We could ask ourselves the purpose of this article. So even though I found it to be entertaining, I think its main purpose is to inform. Inform about about the lighthouse, and the engineer who built it, designed it, and helped build it and refurbish it, right, and make sure it didn't collapse. Win Stanley, right? So I'd say it's equally about him as it is about the White House, not the White House, the lighthouse, right? So it's about this engineer, but it's also about his lighthouse, and it's about this point and like the dangers of that. So, and then the content would simply be the story, right? This would be the story of the lighthouse. All right, so if we go back and we have a look at these questions, so which factor contributed the most difficulty to building the open sea lighthouse? So is it A, the expense, the location, the lack of skilled labor, or the lack of public support? So if we go through the article, we can see that it is the location, right? So it's literally, it's 23 kilometers in the middle of the ocean, basically. So it's a really challenging location to build something. Which phrase shows why Winstanley was so committed to building the lighthouse? Winstanley, furious because of the loss of... So is it the fact that he lost 2 ships? With the upgrades completed, Winstanley was satisfied. Winstanley had proven it possible to save ships approaching Plymouth. Despite a severe windstorm warning, Winstanley insisted on journeying to the lighthouse, right? So these are just, we could use these 4 quotes to back up many ideas, but if what we're trying to do is to demonstrate why this guy was so committed to building his lighthouse, the fact that he lost 2 ships of his 5 ships, that's a really good reason that illustrates why he wanted to build this lighthouse so bad. And that is what you need to be doing when you write your responses to a question, right? So when you're asked to answer a question about a text, then you're going to have an answer, right? What's the main idea of this text, or why did this person act in a certain way, and was this character right to do this, right? And provide examples of this character's motivation and what they really want out of life, right? So in that case, you're quoting directly from the text, and you've got to pick the quotes that are really going to back up your argument. So in 1698, why was the project considered a success? Was it because the lantern helped ships avoid the reef? Because he had built a structure 20 meters high? Because he was able to make repairs to it? Or because the lighthouse was more spacious than the upgraded one? And I think it's simply because it worked, right? It helped them steer ships away from it. Which word is the closest in meaning to depict as used in paragraph 5? So to allow, to define, to believe, or to portray. So you have to look up that word. Modern drawings depict it as a fancy and colorful sight. So what does that word depict mean in this sense? So did the modern drawings, and you could simply just fill in the blanks. The modern drawings allowed it, they defined it, they portrayed it. So portrayed makes the most sense in that case. Question 5. Which of the following best demonstrates Winstanley's overconfidence? How do we best show how overconfident this engineer was? The fact that he simply thought it was possible to build it, the fact that he built it on isolated rocks, that he rebuilt the first lighthouse, or that he remain in the lighthouse just during a storm, right? And I think the fact that he's up there in the storm kind of shows you how confident he was. And sadly, how misplaced that confidence was. What does paragraph 7 contribute to the passage? So we go to paragraph 7. And that is, his wish too was granted. All right, so paragraph 7 describes the tragic night where Winstanley stays with his lighthouse, and not just him, but a crew of 5 men, and how there's no trace of them left after the storm. What's the purpose? What's the why was that paragraph included, right? So you can ask that question. You can ask the purpose of a paragraph, or not the purpose of a paragraph, but just the effectiveness of a paragraph and how one paragraph contributes to the whole story. So did it show a flashback? Did it contribute a conclusion? Did it contribute a turning point in the story, or did it contribute a change in point of view? So I wouldn't necessarily call it a flashback because this whole thing is written in the past. It's not really a conclusion, and it's not really a change. I would say it's a turning point in this story. What is emphasized by the repetition of no in paragraph 8? The reef held no crew, no Winstanley, and no lighthouse. So is that is it to show a new level of danger, to show the degree of the destruction, to show the calmness after the storm, or to show the mystery of the lighthouse's disappearance? And I would argue it's the degree of destruction, right? So even if you don't get multiple choice responses to choose from, these multiple choice responses just show you how you can just get more and more precise with your responses and get closer and closer. And sometimes when you write an answer, you're not necessarily wrong. You're just not specific enough, and you haven't pushed yourself far enough. So be as specific as possible and just dial down to the best answer. Overall, how was the selection organized? So if we're looking at the overall content of this article, was it written chronologically? Was it written from order of importance? Were they comparing and contrasting things, or was it an opinion piece with supporting details? So looks to me like it was chronological, starting with the initial construction of the building all the way to the current building, which was built, a 51 meter. That was the lighthouse that you would see today if you went to this location. And what's the likely reason why efforts to build the lighthouse in this location persisted? Was it because it attracted tourists? Was it to gather weather data, to improve the profitability of Plymouth Port, or to experiment with updated construction methods? And it seems to be like they were trying to improve the profitability of this port. It does seem to come down to money and keeping the ships rolling. Okay, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for tuning in. We will continue our final exam preparation tomorrow.